What is going on, guys? This is Earpugs, and in this video we are going to be covering the Season 1 The Burning Crusade PvP tier list. Now this is going to be covering for 2v2 primarily, while also including 3v3. This is for Season 1 specifically, by the way. So this does not count for Season 2, 3, 4, Meta, etc. This is exclusively the very first season when the game has just begun, the very first time people are going to be playing Arena. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with the Affliction Warlock. Now the Afflock is a very strong situational specialization. Some of the problems that Affliction Lock runs into, for anybody who doesn't know, is that you don't have Soul Link for the Affliction Lock. And this causes a situation where you need to be offensive to be safe. Because if you're not offensive, then you're just going to get run over, right? Seeing as you don't have a portal in this expansion, and you have no Soul Link. So not only are you pretty squishy, but you also have problems with mobility since you have nowhere to go. Specifically in Season 1, I'm going to put Affliction into the C tier for those two primary reasons. Also, Affliction Locks in general always have a tough time dealing with Warriors, and Warriors are super prevalent in the Burning Crusade, as well as Rogues being prevalent. So since Warriors are so prevalent, Rogues are so prevalent, and both of them do such a great job into you, especially before you get spell power, before you get haste, before you get resil, before you get all your health. For all these reasons, I'm going to go ahead and put this in the C tier. You do, of course, have Unstable Affliction, which does a lot of damage if you can get it out, but it's not enough in Season 1 specifically to put you above viable. Another nice thing you also get as Affliction Warlock is Instant Howl. Moving up next, we have the SLSL Warlock. Now, this is an extremely strong spec, seeing as you do get Soul Link. For anybody who doesn't know, this is a hybrid spec that goes between Affliction and Demonology, enough to get you Soul Link as well as getting you Siphon Life. This specialization is very, very strong all of the Burning Crusade, and Season 1 is no exception to this. You are a very tanky, very high control class with the most spread pressure in the entire game, seeing as all three of your dots are instant. So you have Siphon Life, Curse of Agony, and Corruption, all instant. You never need to cast to get those out. So the only times that you're going to be casting as this class is if you're looking to finish a kill with Searing Pain or Incinerate or Immolate, or if you're casting a Fear. Because of those reasons, a lot of the time, you're able to just dot and rot. You can literally just put dots on every target in most situations, and you'll eventually rot them to death, seeing as mana is such a big problem in the Burning Crusade, especially in Season 1, before people even get Earring, and they all have Bangle. You are very tanky thanks to Soul Link. One of the reasons Soul Link is so strong in the Burning Crusade is because Resilience doesn't actually affect any of your baseline damage reduction. It only affects dots and crits. So if a rogue is hemorrhaging you, and they're not critting, whether you have 1,000 resil or 0 resil, it's the same number. However, Soul Link is a flat damage reduction of 20% for every type of damage you could possibly take, which is absolutely monumental for obvious reasons. Moving past that, obviously, you have Death Toil, you've got all your normal Warlock abilities, you don't have Portal, as I mentioned previously, but you are a very, very strong specialization and definitely belong in the A tier in Season 1. Up next, we have Destruction Warlock. Now, Destro Warlock is actually viable in the Burning Crusade. There is people who have gotten rank 1 with it in TBC. And Destro is in an okay place in TBC. It is missing quite a lot of its kit compared to Wrath of the Lich King. So, to compare Destro to Wrath is pretty unfair because you do have Shadow Fury, but you don't have Chaos Bolt. Most of your damage is on Conflag. However, you do not get Soul Link as Destruction, just like Affliction, because you have to go all the way down in Affliction, and you have to go all the way down in Destruction to get Shadow Fury and get Unstable Affliction. As a Warlock in the Burning Crusade, if you are not able to tank people for a long time, it can lead to very big problems. Now, this is a Season 1 tier list, keep in mind, so it's very important to understand that in Season 1, casters are not superbly strong as opposed to where they are in Season 4. However, Warlock is kind of a specific one where SLSL is still really good even in S1, just because of the way TBC goes. But since you have a lower health pool, you have low resil, you have no link, you still could play Destruction, but it's going to be very difficult and you're going to have to play extremely well as the specialization. For all those reasons, I'm going to put it into the C tier. Up next, we have Deep in Demonology. Now, Demonology is kind of a super off-meta pick in TBC. All you get is Felguard. It's like literally the same exact spec as SLSL, except you just get a Felguard instead. And the pet really doesn't do enough work to make it worth. So for this reason, Demonology is just completely overshadowed by SLSL. And there's really not much to talk about with it. It's just worse than AF, it's worse than Destro, it's worse than this one. You would just never play it, really. And for all those reasons, we are going to be putting it into the off-meta spec, seeing as that's what it is. Up next, we have a infamous specialization in the Burning Crusade. We are, of course, talking about the Frost Mage. Now, the Frost Mage is very, very strong in TBC. Season 1 is not the Frost Mage's strongest season, in my opinion. That definitely comes later on when you start to get Sunwell gear and stuff like that. With that being said, it is still ridiculously powerful. Very, very, very strong specialization. As a Frost Mage, you have huge shatter damage, tons of control, a massive toolkit of spells, polymorph, counterspell, tons of novas, tons of slows, water elemental, good consistent damage, good burst damage. You're just a very, very strong class. You have one of the largest toolkits in the game. On top of all of that, you have 2 ice blocks and a blink. So you've got defensives, you've got offense, you've got control. You can even make yourself food in Arena, which actually is kind of a big deal, especially in TBC 2v2. There's a lot of times in the Burning Crusade where you could potentially get into a 1v1 where you cross-kill in 2v2. I would say that probably happens the most in TBC out of any classic expansion. And having food is actually a massive deal for those 1v1s. So, Frost Mage is super, super strong. I would not put it into S in Season 1, which some people may disagree with me on, but if you compare Season 4 to Season 1 Frost Mage, Season 4 Frost Mage blows Season 1 Mage out of the water. For that reason specifically, I'm going to put it in very strong, because it is a super strong specialization, but it is not to the point where it has no counters and there's nothing you can do, and it's just, you just lose by default. It's not quite there. Up next, we have Pom Pyro. Now, this is a complete griefer spec. So, Pom Pyro is a specialization where you go into the Arcane tree to get Presence of Mind, which makes your spell instant, and then you line up damage with your Scorches and stuff like that, trying to get your procs and make sure everything's lined up. And then once you have everything and it looks like it's a good time to send it, you basically just press your Presence of Mind, and then you instantly Pyroblast the target, and you have to hope you kill them right there, right? Because once your Presence of Mind is on cooldown, you're just a way, way worse Frost Mage. Like, way worse. You have no Welly, you have no Shatters, you have 1 block, you don't have Icy Veins. The list just goes on and on of negatives for Pom Pyro. I think I will put it into the viable tier, just at the very bottom of it. Like, you could win with Pom Pyro Arsham into a lot of teams if you just get lucky, because TBC is so RNG to begin with. But at the end of the day, a lot of your wins are just getting lucky, right? Like, you're just going to get completely... Like, let's say you send a Pom Pyro and it just doesn't crit, or you send it into a rogue and he just cloaks it, like, the game's over right there, you know? So your whole game is on 1 cooldown, 1 go, like 2-second window. It's just not really efficient or strong in any way, especially into people who know how you play. If you don't know what Pom Pyro is, like, let's say this was a tier list for people who've never fought you before, then it'd probably go into B. But since it's not so strong, and if you just know what Pom Pyro does, it's such a weak spec, I would put it at the bottom of viable. Up next, we have Arcane. Arcane is really not in a good place in the Burning Crusade. You just don't have any of the toolkits that you need. Even Wrath of the Lich King Arcane is still not superbly great, and Wrath Arcane is 10 times better than TBC Arcane. So for all of those reasons, I'm going to be putting Arcane in the off-meta pick. Moving on to Fire, this is basically the same situation, right? You don't have Pom for your instant Pyroblast. Fire doesn't have any, like, big combustion like you would get in Kata. It does have Dragon's Breath, but it is only 3 seconds instead of 5. You don't really have big goes. You have very big mana problems, and you are just overall much worse than not only Frost, but even Pom Pyro. So for all these reasons, you go into the off-meta pick. Up next, we have the Arms Warrior. Now, the Arms Warrior in TBC is a very straightforward class. It does a lot of damage. Most of its damage is RNG with Mace Stun or Sword Specialization. You also are heavily relying on random crits to proc your deep wounds and then get big damage. You're going to be fighting rogues a lot as an Arms Warrior in TBC, and rogues have evasion, which you're going to have to deal with quite a lot on top of their baseline dodge. So your Mortal Strikes are going to be getting dodged quite a lot. It is a very, very slot machine class. And in Season 1, I honestly don't know if I would put it into the just solid tier or very strong for a couple of reasons. Arms Warrior has a lot of damage, as I mentioned. The only problems is that Arms Warriors pair with Resto Druids very heavily for Warrior Druid in 2s, WLD in 3s, stuff like that, right? Resto Druids in Season 1 are not superbly broken. Their life blooms are not insane. people's health pools aren't big enough. As a warrior, you have pretty low health. It's your lowest health for all of your seasons. You don't have shield wall. You don't have retal. Shield block is nerfed. Spell reflect is 25 rage. So while you do a lot of damage, and you're certainly viable and even strong, your partners that you normally would be able to play with are a little bit weakened. So the only reason that I'm not going to put Arms Warrior into the A very strong tier is for that reason specifically. The fact that Resto Druids and even Holy Pallies are not Giga in S1, right? And you're playing Resto Druid Warrior or H-Pal Warrior in the later seasons, but most people will be playing WD with the Resto Druid. And in Season 1, Rogue Mage is so Giga. It is so strong. And Rogue Mage is one of your trickiest matchups on top of that. So for all those reasons, I'm going to be putting Warrior into the solid tier, because it is a very solid, strong class. It is a very strong specialization, but it is not very strong in Season 1, in my opinion. Up next, we have the Fury Warrior. Now, the Fury Warrior is just worse than Arms in pretty much every way. Not a lot to talk about here. You have no Mortal Strike. You do have, I think you may even have that proc Mortal Strike thing, but it's nothing to talk about here. Arms is just better in virtually every single way. So for that reason, it goes into off meta. Same exact thing with the Prot Warrior here. Prot Warrior is going to go into off meta. Arms is just 10 times better than Fury and Prot. You'll never see a Prot or a Fury at high rating in TBC for those reasons. Moving on to the Broccoli Man. We are now covering the Broccoli, which is the Restoration Druid, who doesn't always play Broccoli spec, but sometimes they do. Resto Druid is arguably one of the strongest healers in the Burning Crusade for a multitude of reasons. One, their Life Bloom is super, super strong. They have Cyclone. You have Feral Charge as a Restoration Druid, so you actually have a kick as a healer from range, too, which is insane with a 15-second cooldown. It's also a root, too. So you have a root and a kick and Cyclone and roots and Rejuve and Swiftman and Life Bloom and Bear Form and Bark Skin and Frenzied Regen. So you're definitely not weak at all as a Resto Druid in TBC. You are in the top 2 healers for sure. Now, since this is a Season 1 tier list, just for Season 1, right, I would actually not put Resto Druid in the S tier for Season 1 for a handful of reasons. The biggest problem that Resto Druids run into in Season 1 is low resil, low health, and low spell power. Your life blooms don't do a ton, your health pool is very limited, your armor is very low, and you have almost no resil to boot. Now, while you are super strong, you're in the very strong category with Frost Mage, SLSL Lock, and R-Druid. In Season 1 specifically, I would not say you're Giga OP just because it's so easy to kill an R-Druid for Rogue Mage, even for Warriors, for really a lot of people, for Warlocks, even for Ret Paladins and a Hodge. Like, you are very susceptible to dying as a Resto Druid in Season 1. It is certainly your weakest season by a very wide margin. If you compare Season 4 Resto Druid to Season 1 Resto Druid, it's almost like 2 different classes in terms of healing output, because you're not really changing your playstyle, right? Life Bloom is your number 1 heal at all times. Your mana is also terrible in Season 1. So you really aren't this giga OP healer that you do become later in the expansion, in the very beginning of the expansion. With all that being said, you are super strong, right? You're very, very strong. You are, I would argue, the second best healer in Season 1 for sure. And for all of these reasons, I'm going to be putting them into the very strong tier. Up next, we have the Boomkin. Now, is the Boomkin even viable in any season of the Burning Crusade? Maybe in the later seasons it would be so niche when you have like a little bit of HP and you could like run like Boomy Arsham something and just try to like Moonfire something to death with like a random Starfire cast that you get. It's a very, very nerfed version of Boomkin in TBC. You don't have Typhoon. You don't have the consistent damage you need. You don't really have the burst damage. And also, you could just play Dream State Resto Druid, and Dream State is basically just a Boomkin, but 10 times better. So if this was Dream State, then I'd probably put it into B. Man, I'd put it into C for Season 1. Maybe B later on seasons. But since this is not Dream State, this is just Boomkin, we're just going to put Boomkin in off meta. Moving on to Feral. Now, this is a really, really unique specialization in the Burning Crusade, right? Feral does a ton of damage. When they have their opener, when they have uptime on a target, they do a ton of damage. The main strengths of Feral Druid in TBC is that they have great off heals, a good amount of control, and a great amount of burst damage too. In Season 1, Ferals are actually pretty strong. They're just super hard to play. This is a very difficult class for me to place because it's rank 1 viable every single season, especially season 1, but that's no exception. But it's really hard to play Feral at a high level. You have to have a really good understanding of the game in TBC to play Feral Druid. You have to understand when your goes are. You have to understand when to go in, when to go out. You have to know when to off-heal. You have to switch to your staff for off-heals. Your off-heals are phenomenal as a Feral Druid in TBC. It's probably the best off-healing for Feral out of any expansion, to be honest, out of all the classic ones. So it's definitely better than UA Lock. It's better than Destro. It's better than Pom Pyro. I would probably put it at the bottom of B tier in Season 1. It is definitely strong, and it is quite comp-restricted. As far as your Giga comp, it's pretty much only Feral Druid and Sub Rogue. You can play like Disc Feral a little bit, but you really, if you're trying to play at the highest level, your number 1 comp 100% is Feral Druid Rogue. I will put it into the bottom of B tier just because it is very, very strong, but it is so hard to play. Like, so hard to play. You really have to have a good idea of what's going on to play this specialization at high rating in the Burning Crusade. Up next, we have the BM Hunter for Season 1. Now, unfortunately, this is the strongest season for BM Hunters, seeing as people have the lowest resil, the lowest health, the most damage they take, etc. And BM Hunter is very similar to Pom Pyro, except that it's a little bit stronger than Pom Pyro. While you are relying on your Bestial Wrath cooldown to pretty much get almost all of your kills, healers have very low mana, and people die pretty quickly in Season 1, right? So anything that has a lot of burst that it can repeatedly do, seeing as Bestial Wrath isn't a terribly long cooldown, it does put it into the very bottom of B or the top of C. I think just because this is a Season 1 tier list, keep in mind, Beast Mastery Hunter is going to go in the bottom of B. As the seasons progress, healers get stronger, people get more health, and your Bestial Wrath or Beast Within CD still stays the same. It's a very one-dimensional spec. You are trying to kill somebody on your BM, and you are pretty much trying to just raw overpower a lot of teams. And in TBC, that does work in certain matchups, but there's a lot of times where just trying to press Bestial Wrath and win the game right there is very impossible into a team that knows what you're trying to do. They will never give you the window to press, as well as when you do press Bestial Wrath, they'll be completely ready. They'll have evasion, they'll already be out of line, they'll have Hellstone, they'll have PS, they'll have Bear Form, they'll know what's going on. But with all that being said, it is strong in Season 1 specifically, so we're going to put it in the bottom of B tier for Season 1. Up next is the Marksmanship Hunter. Now, this specialization is very strong in TBC in a very specific way. It's really good at rotting people, it's really good at just standing on a pillar and frost trapping, and then just completely running the other healer out of mana. Your freezing trap is the longest CC in the entire game. It's 14 seconds in the Burning Crusade, so if you actually land your freezing trap, it is a pretty big deal, since so many teams, especially in Season 1, don't have a Dispel. This is very strong, lets you deal with Rogue Mage a lot better. You do have Scatter Shot, you do have good damage. If you can ever cast your aim shot, then you actually will get some decent damage out. Overall, it definitely is going to go into the solid tier. There is an argument to be made that it's very strong, because it is really strong. But again, the other problem that this has, right, is Hunter Druid is a very common comp that you're going to play. And Season 1 Druid is very strong, but it's not Giga, right? So it's almost in the same boat as Warrior for that specific reason. You can play Hunter Priest, of course, and Priest is very strong in Season 1, but Hunter Priest has a lot of problems with a lot of different matchups, right? You don't have Poison Cleanse. Priests are very easy to kill, especially if you're on the Horde and they're undead. You don't have that many peels. As a hunter in TBC, you don't have a disarm, a Scorpion Sting. Your deterrence is very nerfed compared to Wrath as well. It just increases your parry rating. It doesn't actually deflect. But with all that being said, it is a strong specialization for sure, just a very niche playstyle. The Hunter is a very, very dampener in TBC. It's almost like the opposite of Wrath of the Lich King, Marksmanship Hunter. Because Marks in Wrath of the Lich King is a very go-focused class. You're going to set up your scatter shot, you're going to get the fear off the scatter, you're going to get the trap off the scatter, you're going to mind control, you're going to use readiness, you're going to double scatter, you're going to double silence. But in TBC, you're really not doing any of that kind of stuff, right? You're still scatter trapping sometimes, you're still using traps, of course, but you're really dampening a lot of games. So if you don't like long games, you probably won't like Marksmanship Hunter or any version of Hunter in TBC, because Viper Sting is very, very strong, but that's basically their whole game plan, right? Marksmanship does have okay damage. If they're able to sit there and just aim shot, steady shot, they can actually put some good damage out, but they're very turret based, and they're often not going to be in the middle of the map casting, because everyone's going to be lining you. So for that reason, I put it in the solid tier. It is strong. and it's very tricky with how it plays. So for all those reasons, I put it into the B tier. Up next, we have Survival. Now, Survival does get Wyvern Sting, which is very strong when they don't have an Abolish, but a lot of teams have an Abolish, right? Because their Shamans have Abolish, Paladins have Abolish, and Druids have Abolish for poisons. So the only team that you're going to be able to actually get Wyverns off into that doesn't have an Abolish is Priest teams, which there is a lot of, and of course Rogue Mage and double DPS, etc. Honestly, Survival and Marks, they have very, very similar playstyles in terms of what they can do, what they're capable of, etc. And honestly, I'm not educated enough on Season 1 versus 4 Hunter, Marks versus Survival in TBC. I'm just not educated enough on these specific specializations to give you a super high level input and say that, oh no, in Season 1, Marks is 10 times better than Survival, because I've fought both of them, and honestly, they're both very strong. I think Marks is better for sure, but Survival's still very strong, and since this is a Season 1 tier list, I can't tell you with a straight face that I know that Marks in Season 1 is better than Survival in Season 1, because I just don't. I just know they're both strong and capable classes with a very similar playstyle, and for that reason, they're going to go into the B tier above BM. Up next, we have a terrible, terrible specialization, probably the worst spec in the whole game. We have the Sub-Rogue, especially in Season 1. This class is so bad, guys. Oh my god, is it bad. As you can guess, it is not bad. Sub-Rogue is insane in the Burning Crusade, arguably the best class in the game for almost every season, and Season 1 is no exception to this. In my opinion, the Season 1 Rogue is so powerful for such a multitude of reasons. One of the hardest things for rogues to deal with, especially later on in the seasons, is Resto Druids and Mages. And in Season 1, Resto Druids and Mages are good, but they're not Giga like they are later. On top of that, Rogue has a very high amount of base damage, and Rogue also does not really benefit from health and resils later on in the expansion, because you're going to be wearing so much PvE gear every single season. Season 1, 2, 3, 4, you're wearing so many PvE off parts, it's insane. So you're never really that tanky as a Sub-Rogue. Even a Season 4 Sub-Rogue is pretty squishy. They're pretty easy to kill. So the whole I'm squishy argument in Season 1 almost doesn't apply to them because their playstyle never changes. They're living off evasion. They're living off Cloak of Shadows. They're utilizing their Shadow Step to get away. They're using their sprints. They're gouging the target to slow them down. They have stuns. They have blind. They have all these different toolkits to keep them alive, and none of them involve resil or health. It's a very control-based melee. And for all of these reasons, I'm going to put Rogue into the S tier for Season 1. Up next is Assassination, aka Mutilate. And Mutilate is in a weird spot in TBC. It's the same boat as the Wrath of Lich King pretty much, where you don't have Shadow Step, but you have a lot of damage if you have uptime on a target. So this makes it a very rock, paper, scissors class. If you have a priest on the other team and you're not going to get peeled off their priest, you'll 100% just run that priest down and kill him. But if you fight a team with an Abolish, if you fight a warrior, if you fight a BM hunter, if you fight a Sub-Rogue even, if you fight a lot of different classes and specializations, Frost Mage, you're going to be kited all the time. You have no Shadow Step, you have almost no mobility, and you're just overall much weaker than Sub is by a pretty wide margin. I don't even know if I'd put it into Viable, to be honest, because I just don't think that you would ever play this at a high level. So I'm going to put it into the off-meta specialization just for that reason. You would never see an Assassination Rogue at high rating. The only way they could get there is if they knew what they were fighting and they sniped their way up the ladder. There's just too many mages, and you just have no answer for Frost Nova. You have no Shadow Step. You have no answer for so many different comps. Up next we have Combat. Kind of same situation as Assassination, even worse than Assassination, honestly. Combat is just not good in TBC for literally any reason. I don't even know a single reason why you would ever play Combat in TBC. So for that reason, we're just going to put it off meta because it's completely unviable. Up next, we have the Discipline Priest. Now, this class is an interesting one. Now, keep in mind that this is a Season 1 tier list. One thing that's really important to understand about the Discipline Priest is that most of its healing and power comes from offensive purges, instant cast spells like Prayer of Mending and Renew, and of course their Power Word Shield, right? Now, Power Word Shield has very high base stats in TBC, just like Wrath of the Lich King, and it's the same situation where in Season 1, you have very strong shields, and Power Word Shield actually doesn't scale in TBC very much at all, just like Wrath of the Lich King. So in Season 1, not only do you have a very strong shield, you are also paired with extremely high damage, because Disc Priests have a very high amount of base damage. This creates a situation where the Disc Priest has Fear, Mind Control, Offensive Purge, with double Purge, by the way, as well as having double Magic Dispel for their team, Abolish Disease, Mind Blast, Death, Dots as well, and if you're a dwarf, they have Stone Form, Desperate Prayer, and Chastise. All of these things together, in Season 1 specifically, puts Disc Priest into the S tier for sure. In my opinion, it is the only season where Disc Priest is above Resto Druid, but for sure, in Season 1 specifically, Disc Priest is stronger than Resto Druid, for all of the reasons that I just listed. You have a great amount of offensive pressure, your shields are super strong, Fear is super high value, and Desperate Prayer has a large amount of healing as well in Season 1, since it has a high amount of base healing. That's pretty much all there is about Disc Priest. Super strong early season. This is Season 1, of course, remember, guys, so this is not Season 4 or an overall tier list. Up next, we have the Holy Priest. I have deadass no clue why you would ever play this. It's worse than Disc in every regard. You would just never play it. It's just worse than Disc. Like, every part of it is worse than Disc. There's not a single reason you'd play it. Up next is Shadow. Shadow is actually in a weird position in TBC. It is viable, right? Shadow Priest is viable. And the thing about Shadow Priest is that it's really not that different from Disc, right? The only difference is that Discipline has pain suppression, Shadow Priest has silence, and even some Disc specs can go with no PS and take silence. And then, of course, you have Vampiric Touch on the Shadow Priest. But Vampiric Touch is pretty nerfed, right? Because Vampiric Touch does not do damage when you dispel it in the Burning Crusade, which is a big mechanic they added in Wrath. On top of that, VT doesn't hit that hard. One of your only comps you're going to play is Shadow Priest Rogue, which is just, in my opinion, a worse version of Disc Rogue, because you play it almost the same, with a little exception that you're going to be a little bit more aggressive as the Shadow Priest version. This is a Season 1 tier list, keep in mind, guys, and Warriors absolutely incinerate Shadow Priest in Season 1. Rogues demolish Shadow Priest in Season 1. It's just not in a great position. It doesn't have the resil it needs. It doesn't have the stamina it needs. It does have high base stats like Disc Priest does, but the things that make Disc strong is almost the same things that make Shadow weak in TBC. Because Disc can do a lot of damage. Disc can do great off heals because they're a healer. Disc has the same exact toolkit almost as Shadow, with the addition of pain suppression, of course. So for all those reasons, Shadow Priest is going to go into the bottom of viable. This is Season 1, of course. I think there's an argument maybe in Season 4 or later seasons that you could put it up maybe one tick to play Shadow Priest Mage, but even then, it's not in a great position in TBC. It is viable. It's not unplayable. You will fight Shadow Priest for sure, but it's not super strong. It is not Wrath of the Lich King Shadow Priest. Like, if you've played Wrath of the Lich King Shadow Priest, especially Season 7, 8, that is like, I would say 3 times stronger than TBC Shadow Priest for sure. So with all that being said, it's going to go into the bottom of the viable tier. It is viable, but I think it's just viable. That's about all it is. Okay, up next is a really weird one. Okay, we have the Resto Shaman. Okay, Resto Shaman's in a weird place in TBC for like a lot of reasons, right? It has a lot of offensive pressure. It does do some damage. You do have Earthshock, you do have Purge, you do have Bloodlust, you do have Wind Fury Totem. You do have a lot of offensive things, right? But you don't have a Magic Dispel. So dealing with mages is very difficult for you, and there's a lot of mages in the Burning Crusade. You pair heavily with warriors as a Resto Shaman because of Wind Fury Totem, right? You have Wind Fury Totem, and then you have your warrior who could play either Mace Spec or Sword Spec, which are both going to be completely RNG, but if you do get a Sword Spec lined up with a Wind Fury Totem proc, you truly can global a target. They also pair, of course, with the infamous Ret Paladin, so Ret Paladin Arsham is probably their strongest comp, if I had to guess, because the Ret Paladin allows you to deal with mages in a better situation, whereas if you were a warrior, right? Because Ret Paladin can dispel you, Ret Paladin can freedom, Ret Paladin can bop, Ret Paladin has Blessing of Sack, they have bubble, they have a lot bigger toolkit to help you out, and Resto Shaman really needs that support from the Ret Paladin. With all that being said, in Season 1, people have low health, low resil, right? So any comp that's going to focus on damage, a damage priority comp, is going to be pretty strong in Season 1, and Ret Paladin Arsham, Warrior Arsham are completely damage comps. All you're going to be doing is looking for Wind Fury procs, you're going to run a target down, and you're going to win or lose on damage in almost all situations. You don't have Hex, remember, and you do decent damage if you cast Chain Lightning. So with all that being said, I'm going to put it into the bottom of the solid tier. It is definitely strong. Ret Arsham is a very strong specialization, but I don't think it's in a position where it's super giga. So for that reason, I'm going to put it into the B tier, because it is a solid spec. Up next, we have the Elisham. The only time I've ever seen an Elisham played in the Burning Crusade at even a remotely high level was Elisham Boomkin and Elisham Shadow Priest. And Elisham is it's at the bottom of C tier just because you can play Elisham Shadow Priest Mage in 3s, and in 2s, I really don't know what you could play, to be honest. Maybe you could play, like, I don't even know what you'd play, dude. Like, Ellie Rogue, maybe? Like, it's really hard to say what you would play. It's just, you have to cast. You don't have Thunderstorm. You don't have Hex. You don't have Earthgrab Totem. You don't have Stoneclaw Totem that's super strong like it is in Wrath. Like, your kit is so small compared to where you are in Wrath, right? Ellie is so good in Wrath. But in TBC, it does some damage, and that's about it. Like, it's just a worse mage, kind of. It does damage, but if you ever get tunneled, you're doing nothing as an alien shot. You're not casting anything. You're just flame shocking, frost shocking, wolfing away. You're really not that strong. I'm hard pressed to even put it into viable, but I think I'll put it at the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of viable. Just because in 3v3, there is that comp you can play, which is Shadow Priest, Ellie Mage, and it's actually okay. So I'll put it in viable just for that reason. Up next, we have Enhancement Shaman. It's like in the same position as Ellie for me. Enhancement in TBC is very, very mediocre, right? You do have Bloodlust, you do damage, but that's kind of all you do. You don't have Hex, you don't have Maelstrom, you don't have a lot of the toolkit that you get in Wrath in terms of your survivability, seeing as you're able to play with a Preg in Wrath, and Pregs keep you alive a lot better. I don't know if I would even put it into viable, to be honest. You could make an argument that Priest Enhance is playable in Season 1. Probably, honestly, in Season 1, that's the only time you would ever play Priest Enhance. So since this is a Season 1 tier list, I may put it into the bottom of viable. I think I will put it in the bottom of viable, but keep in mind, this is not a strong specialization in TBC. It does damage. You've got Earthshock. You've got Purge. That's it, right? You've got Earthshock, Purge, damage. If you're not killing, if you're sitting Novas, if you don't have uptime, if you're getting kited, you're running a mana, you're just kind of useless. So, bottom of C tier. Very bottom for sure. Up next is the Retribution Paladin for Season 1. Now, the Ret Paladin in TBC is very, very strong, honestly. I don't think that Ret Paladin is ever bad, honestly. Mainly because you play Ret Arsham, right? These two classes right here are the ones that go together. There are other stuff. You can play Ret Rogue. Ret Rogue is actually pretty decent. You could even play Ret Rogue Priest in 3s as well. You can also play Ret Warrior Arsham in 3s. So in Season 1, it is very good. Your primary playstyle is going to be with an Arsham. You have the Wind Fury. For anyone who doesn't know, the primary playstyle of TBC Retribution Paladin is called Seal Twisting, right? So you're going to utilize your seals. You're going to watch your swing bar at the bottom with your add-on or whatever, and then you're going to Seal Twist right when you get your auto. You get the chance to do this big proc that combines with Wind Fury and truly can one-shot a target. If you line up your Seal Twist with a Wind Fury proc and you have everything going for you with wings especially, I am not kidding, you could literally 100 to 0 any target in the game. So if there's a priest that has no trinket and you walk over to them, you hodge them, you press wings, you get all the buffs, you get Bloodlust, you get every CD, you can 100-0 that priest in 1 second. They will die 100-0. And for that reason, it is definitely strong. I don't believe that Ret Paladin would be in the very strong tier, but it would be in the strong tier for sure. It is a relatively niche spec in terms of what you can play with it, right? You can only play a handful of comps, but that's kind of how TBC is in general. TBC is not really a comp variety expansion. With all that being said, it is definitely a strong class. I would actually put Arsham above BM for sure, and I'd put Arsham above Feral. So I'd probably put it somewhere in this, like B in the solid tier. You could even put it above Warrior in Season 1, honestly. It's pretty freaking good. It's really quite good in Season 1. And in general, it's just an overall roundabout strong specialization, so that's why it's going to go into this B solid specialization. Up next, we have the Protection Paladin. In TBC, it's completely unviable. Start to finish, Season 1 through 3, 4. So for that reason, boom, off meta it is. Up next, we have the Holy Pally. Holy Pally is in a weird position, right? In the Burning Crusade, right? You have Holy Shock, you have Flash of Light, you don't have Divine Sacrifice. Your Hand of Sacrifice is a 30-second CD. You're very susceptible to tongues. You're forced to cast a lot. You don't get instant Flash of Light procs. you do have Bubble, you do have Freedom, you do have Hodge, you do have Wings. So it is a playable specialization, but this is a Season 1 tier list, remember. So since this is a Season 1 tier list, I would probably put it at like the top of viable, probably. You could play a handful of things, maybe you could play a couple things in 2s and 3s. Your primary comp you're going to see HPAL play is Holy Paladin Warrior, which is rank 1 viable, and I would even consider it strong in the later seasons of the Burning Crusade, but not in Season 1. Warriors just don't have the health. Your healing power just isn't there. You don't have the resil. You're just going to die way too easily to Rogue Mage in Season 1. So I will put it into viable, because maybe if you were just the best player in history, you could play it and win, right? You could also play Shockadin with a mage, like you could play Pom Pyro Shockadin, stuff like that. But again, it's a very niche situation that you would be like, oh my god, we're winning because I'm a Holy Pally in Season 1, right? Like, that's not really a sentence you would say. So for all those reasons, it is viable, it is decent, but it's just decent. And this is Season 1. I would argue it gets a lot better later on in the seasons. And this is the final tier list for Season 1. We have Sub-Rogue as insane, Disc Priest is ridiculous Season 1, SLSL Warlock, Frost Mage, Resto Druid, super strong classes. Rets are great, Arms Warrior is great, Marksmanship's great, Ret Sham, strong. Feral, pretty strong if you play it right. Survival, good. Beast Mastery, decent Season 1, right? This is where I would put everything just for Season 1. I will be actually covering all the seasons of TBC with tier lists, by the way, so I will be covering Season 1, 2, 3, and 4, which you will see these specs get jumbled around a little bit here and there depending on which season, because as the seasons progress, people get new items, they get new gear, they get different health, they get more damage, they get more X, they get more this, they get less this. But this is where I would put everything for a Season 1 tier list for the Burning Crusade. Thank you for watching, guys. If you want to see more of the TBC content, I'm going to be making a ton of the Burning Crusade content. I'm actually working on my class picking guide right now. I have it halfway done. So subscribe if you want to see more of that. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate it, and we'll see you in the next video.